I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Unveiling Obadiah Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Unveiling Obadiah Hawkins. I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. I have a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters now entering the sanctuary. It's unusual label Barzillai Hawkins.
This is time. Caleb.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, the title of my speech today is The Vatican, Divining Serpent, is Deceiving the World About the Creator's Name. Now, in the Mark of the Beast, chapter 2, volume 2, verse on page 15. It says, 2 Thessalonians 2:9 shows that this mark was brought on the world through lying. One of these lies is the pagan festival of Easter. We know that Sunday is not the seventh day of the week. It is the first day. We also know it was named after the sun god Baal. So it's telling you there that the worldly government today is made up of lies. Now, in 2008, the Vatican declared that the name Yahweh should not be used in any of their literature. And here's the article right here. It says, barring Yahweh. Then it says, observant Jews have traditionally not used the name Yahweh, refusing to pronounce the so-called proper name of God. Out of respect, or to be sure they do not misuse it. Now, either will Roman Catholics, at least in their worship service. It says there, observant Jews have traditionally not used the name Yahweh refusing to pronounce it, so-called proper name of God, out of respect, to be sure they do not misuse it. It's not out of respect to make sure they don't misuse it. They don't like Yahweh's way, and they don't want to keep Yahweh's laws. Apparently the Vatican has amnesia, because here they spell Yahweh correctly, Y-H-W-E-H. Then when the Pope wanted to find the real name of God, he wrote right here, Y-A-W-E-H. So, apparently they have amnesia. Even Google knows how to spell Yahweh right. See, I wrote in on Google Y-A-W-E-H. It says showing results for Y-A-H-W-E-H, and it says search instead for Y-A-W-E-H. So, Google even knows more. Praise Yahweh. Now, Satan's government is being led by the Vatican, which the leader of the Vatican right now is Pope Francis. Pastor said last week that when we see the people in the UN sitting around the same table, they're lying to each other. They're making each other they're trying to persuade each other to believe what they're saying. Now, the Vatican cannot hide that they're trying to change Yahweh's laws. Now, in Daniel Daniel 5 and verse 25. Daniel 5 and verse 25. Found on page 676. It says, and this is written, that was written, mene tekel upharsin. Now Satan at this time can deceive mankind, but her time is very short. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 9, it says, whose coming is according to the energy of Satan, who works with all power and signs and lying wonders. And the great deacon last week, he showed that, Satan's pictures, how they say, oh, we found this sign in the sky. They're Photoshopped. The pictures aren't real. But that doesn't occur here in the house of Yahweh. Now, Satan has tried to destroy the work of Yahweh many, many times, but will not succeed, because this is Yahweh's last day's work that will never be destroyed. Praise Yahweh. Also in 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse 10, it says, and with all deceivableness of sin is those who are perishing, because they did not receive the love and truth that they might be saved. That love and truth is Yahweh's laws. They didn't receive the laws that they should have been taught. And we will actually have to go out and teach them Yahweh's laws. We have only a little more time left to keep singing. Like Pastor said, a couple of weeks ago, he said, our time is almost up. We don't have time left. Now, before the house of Yahweh, there was no one to teach these people how to conduct themselves in a righteous manner. Knowledge had to be increased for them to know that. So in conclusion, if you turn over to 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 7. It says, always learning but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. So let's not be like the Vatican, always hearing something from the house of Yahweh but never listening to it. Let's be like Yeshua, how when he learned something, he practiced it. And with that, if you all please stand.
If you all remain standing, I'll turn it over to the queens in the house of Yahweh.
Yahweh's looking at you, Yahweh's looking at me. He's looking to raise up family. He's searching for those who obey his commands. The choice is yours, where do you stand? Oh, Yahweh gave us all of his laws and told us to obey. He wants us to be just like him, and that's okay. Yahweh's looking at you, Yahweh's looking at me. He's looking to raise up family. He's searching for those who obey his commands. The choice is yours, where do you stand? Oh, Satan will try to make us fall and try to tempt us away. We may stumble, but we'll never give up. We're for Yahweh all the way. Yahweh's looking at you, Yahweh's looking at me. He's looking to raise up family. He's searching for those who obey his commands. The choice is yours, where do you stand? We love Yahweh with all of our hearts. We hope that you do too. Won't you join our family? The choice is up to you. Yahweh's looking at you, Yahweh's looking at me. He's looking to raise up family. He's for those who obey his commands. The choice is yours, where do you stand? Yahweh's looking at you, Yahweh's looking at me. He's looking to raise a family. He's searching for those who obey his commands. The choice is yours, where do you stand? The choice is yours, where do you stand?
If you'll remain standing, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you the first speaker, a great son of Israel Abel, the great Deacon White Buffalo Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I'm going to start out today let's go ahead and turn over to Jeremiah chapter 23, and let's look at verse 6. And we need to keep this scripture in mind when we go throughout this today. It says, "In his days Yada will be saved, and Israel will dwell safely. And this is the name that he will proclaim to them, Yahweh Sidkenu, Yahweh our righteousness." Earlier in the week, at the Feast of Pentecost, we briefly covered the restoration of the Book of Yahweh, on how John Wycliffe and how the Vatican Church hated him. They even burned his bones, and the many other people who helped get the Book of Yahweh to us in these last days. So today I want to tie in the Book of Yahweh and its restoration with some of the numbers that tie into it. We're going to start in this right here. This calendar right here, the Acts of Yahweh's Last Day's Work, 2017, on the fifth Roman month, the Book of Yahweh restored. It says the Book of Yahweh is back and it's here to stay, and it gives some scriptures, and it talks about the Book of Yahweh. But right here, there's a quote from Israel Hawkins, 9/30/2015, and it says, "Yes, the house of Yahweh restored the Book of Yahweh." Okay, and this is in the calendar. So, I entered this into the gematria, and these are the results. You have English Ordinal 512. And that's the number we're going to focus on for right now. If you'll turn over to Daniel chapter 5 and verse 12. Daniel chapter 5 and verse 12. It says, it's on page 676. It says, "For because an excellent spirit, knowledge and understanding was found in this Daniel." And we see these characteristics in these last days. We see excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding. It says, "Whom the king named Belteshazzar for the interpreting of dreams, solving of riddles and dark sayings, and dissolving of difficulties. Now may Daniel be summoned, and he will reveal the interpretation." So, focus on the words interpreting of dreams. If you remember, on 5:12, that was when our overseer had the dream, Yahweh is in full control. 5:12. The next number right here is 3072 in the Babylonian gematria, which is what Pastor used in the Mark of the Beast. And then look at what this means. All right, Yahweh Sidkenu, which is also in Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 6. Right there, and the short definition is righteousness. The next number, the Hebrew gematria, 4356. All right, and 4356 in the Hebrew means an enclosure or fold. Please turn over to Jeremiah chapter 23 again. Jeremiah chapter 23. And we're going to look at verses 3 to 6. It says, "But I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and bring them back to their folds, homes, and they will be fruitful and increase." So notice the word folds. It says, "And I will set up shepherds over them." Let's hold that thought, because this word means sheepfolds. And if you go further, it means a pen for flocks, sheepfold. It comes from this Hebrew word right here, which means completeness, perfection, purest, and purest gold. Purest gold. So notice the words completeness and perfection, because that is what this book of Yahweh is being restored to. It means completion, and it means perfect. It means to be complete, at end, finished, accomplished, finished. It means brings to pass. But look at the sheepfolds, okay? Remember Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 3 and 4. "I will set up shepherds over them who will feed them, and they will fear no more, nor be dismayed, and neither will they be lacking." Okay, the people in this world today are lacking the truth. Let's go over to the Greek 4356. Greek 4356, that means a receiving, a taking to oneself, acceptance, a receiving. Notice that receiving. It means receiving. I take to myself. It means accepted and received. How many of you remember this? So if we see this Prophetic Word magazine, and look at the date, 6/14, okay? The month of June, 2014. By the way, look at the gold, the Book of Yahweh, okay? Purest gold. But look at the 6/14 here in the Hebrew, and it means ingathering, harvest. Let's look at verse 3 again. That first part, it says, "But I will gather the remnant of my flock." So it means ingathering, harvest, ingathering. It means gathered, and it comes from this word, this Hebrew word, which means gathered. It means bring, brought together, collect, collected, gathered, gathering. It means gather. In the Greek, it means hidden away. It means secret and stored up. And remember, the Vatican took the Book of Yahweh from the people and they hid it away. It means treasured, hid, and kept secret. Let's look at this right here. It comes from this Greek word. And notice the number right there. You see it? All right, 613. 613 laws. It means I hide away, conceal, keep secret. It means to keep secret and hide. And that's what they did to the Book of Yahweh. But the Book of Yahweh is back. And it's here to stay. We have the Book of Yahweh handed to us in these last days because of the work of these people before us who worked very hard to find out the truth. And they're going to be very amazed when they find out what they did, okay? And the Vatican couldn't keep the people from knowing the truth because even a copy of the Bible was found in the king's bedroom. So in these last days, we have this book given to us. With that, I'd like to turn over to the next speaker, the great Deacon Shalom Hawkins, if y'all please stand.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. All right, now we've heard a lot about the Book of Yahweh being restored, and that's what I'm going to be talking about also today. Is the Book of Yahweh restored? And we heard a little bit about Wycliffe, how he translated the Book of Yahweh, and then the Pope ordered his bones dug up and had them burned and cast into the sea. Now, we heard how people tried to get the Book of Yahweh back. Now, that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the Book of Yahweh restored. If you go ahead and turn over to Isaiah 34. Isaiah 34 and verse 16, it says, "Search out the Book of Yahweh and read. Now one of these will be neglected, for it is written, Yahweh is their shepherd, they shall not want. For his mouth has commanded it, and his spirit has gathered them." So search out the Book of Yahweh. In the latest calendar, the Acts of Yahweh's last day's work, for the 5th Roman month, May, it says here at the bottom, this is what we're going to be focusing on. It says here, search out the Book of Yahweh, and it has this scripture. This is talking about the Book of Yahweh being restored, and it has that scripture. Notice the underline, search out the Book of Yahweh. Well, when you put that in the gematria, it shows these three numbers, 277, 1662, and 2140. Right now we're going to focus on 2140. 2140 in the Greek is beneficence, if you could see that. That's the word we're going to focus on. It means well-doing, adorning, great, and beneficence. Now, if you don't know what that word means, from Fast Facts, it means beneficence is action that is done for the benefit of others. And that's what Wycliffe did. That's what Wycliffe did when he translated the Book of Yahweh from Latin to English. Alright, it's an action done for the benefit of others. Now these actions can be taken to help prevent or remove harms, or remove sin, or to simply improve the situation of others. And that's what occurs when you keep Yahweh's laws. You know, it improves others, the situation of others. Now the 2140 in the Hebrew, 2140 in the Hebrew means pure. It means pure. Let's turn over to Zephaniah 3:9. Zephaniah 3:9, it's on page 713. And it says, "Yes, at that time I will return to the peoples, the pure word, the law and the prophets, so that all of them may call on the name of Yahweh and serve him with one accord." Unity. So he says there that he will return to them the pure word. And that's what this number here, 2140, that's what this number is talking about, the pure word. It also means to be transparent or clean, physically or morally, to be clean, be bright, be pure, to cleanse. And as you see here, this is 21:35, that's what it leads to. It means to be clear, count pure, to be clean, and that's what this word basically means, to be justified. Now let's look at the calendar again, with the word clear in our minds. It says here, the Book of Yahweh tells it plain and clear. Does everyone see that? Praise Yahweh. Plain and clear, just like it was originally written in the Hebrew. It says, verses are not mistranslated to hide their meaning, nor are they left unwritten because they are problematic to corporations. The Book of Yahweh is the closest thing to the Hebrew original in exposing sin and sinners, and in showing what their judgment will be. It also points out clearly the only way that one can be made into the image and likeness of Yahweh and receive offices in the house of Yahweh is by keeping and obeying every law of Yahweh. So you see the word clear. So this is plain and clear. The Book of Yahweh is plain and clear. Now the next number here is 1662. 1662. And as you can see here, wine press of digging. But it leads to this Hebrew word, which means to dig or search for. To dig or search for, and it means to search and to dig for something hidden. Remember, the Vatican had the Book of Yahweh hidden away from the people. And that's what this number is talking about. It means to dig for something hidden, to search out. And remember Isaiah 34 verse 16, which says to search out the Book of Yahweh. And then the next number, 277. 277 in Greek, it means immovable and firm. And remember the prophetic word we just saw that said the Book of Yahweh is back and it's here to stay. Alright, immovable. Now, it comes from this scripture here, if everyone can turn to it. 1 Corinthians 15. That's what this number comes from. First Corinthians 15 and verse 58 says, therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable. There's that word immovable. Always abounding in the work of Yahweh, and knowing that your labor is not in vain in Him. So remember all those numbers, and brothers and sisters, remember that your work is not in vain. And with that, if everyone will please stand. And now I'd like to turn over to the great Deacon David Knighton Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. This is pretty exciting. This morning, Yahweh shared something with us. As the singer in the parking lot was singing out loud, he sang, "Look up in the sky! Look over the sanctuary!" And what we saw, zooming in right in the middle there, can you see that? It's a number 5 right there. Can y'all see that number 5? Pretty tough. Well, if you'd like to see it, just get with us and we'll show it to you. But it's clearly a number 5 right there over pastors' windows. All right, so this number 5, it means in Strong's Greek, it means Abba. You can see that right there. Abba, Father. And then below that, it states that Father, also used as the term of tender endearment by a beloved child, in an affectionate, dependent relationship with their father, daddy, or papa. And it makes me think of us being pastors' children. We're always children too, but we're pastors' children, and he takes care of us. All right, so now we call out to pastor daily, and we call him, pastor. We call him teacher. We call him dad, and rightly so, because he stands for the Father. He stands for Yahweh. He stands for the Father right here on the earth, and he's the only one that can legitimately call Yahweh Father at this time, because he stands in his place. In fact, praise Yahweh. In fact, turn to Revelations 11:4, please. Can you still hear? All right, Revelations 11:4. And it says, "These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lamps of the 7-lamp lampstand, ministering for the Father in the earth." Ministering for the Father in the earth, legitimately the one that stands in Yahweh's place here for us today. So, Pastor has this connection with Yahweh. Pastor has this connection with Yahshua, through Yahshua. And we have it through Pastor. And Pastor's overflowing with Spirit Holy. And you know what? He shares that with us. He shares it with us, and we cry out. We cry out all the time, asking for things. Turn to Romans 8:15, please. Romans 8:15. This is going to be pretty quick. That's on page 879, Romans 8:15. And it says, "For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear." You know what the spirit of bondage is? That's that sin, the sin that we go back to, the spirit of sin. What we have is the spirit of righteousness, that spirit that's shared with us. "But you received the spirit of adoption." That's right, when we can finally be called sons of Yahweh, sons and daughters of Yahweh, by which we cry out, "Abba, Father." And we cry out all the time, and we ask, when? When will these things take place? When is our redemption? Pastor, when is this going to take place, right? And guess what? Turn to Luke 21:28, please. Luke 21:28. And that's on page 809, or I'm sorry, 808. Now, so when we see these things, just like the clouds, just like the signs that Yahweh shares with us, and all the things taking place out in the world, when we see all these prophecies coming true, all you have to do is look at the news. Just look at the news, and it's just like reading, just like Pastor said, on the calendar. If you look at the 2017 calendar and look at those pages, that's the same thing that's going on right now in the news today. And remember, Yahweh wrote about these, Pastor wrote about these things many, many, many years ago before they even started taking place. And Yahweh showed him even before that. Yahweh had it all written down 6,000 years ago. So let's remember, let's look at Luke 21:28. It says, "So when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up our heads, because your redemption draws near." So we are looking for our redemption, and we cry out, and guess what? It's near. And remember that Yahweh is in full control. And that's one of the things He showed us today, reminding us that He's in full control, and that we need to look to Pastor. He's right there. Number 5, he was the 5th born too out of his family. The 5th born, how about that? So we look at that number 5 and remember, Abba, Father. Pastor, please, when is our redemption? When's this going to take place? And he tells us these things. He tells us to keep our eyes open, that it's all coming to pass right now in front of our very eyes, and we are sitting in the middle of prophecy. I thank you for your time, and it's my great honor and privilege to present to you the great Kohan, Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. Okay, now I want you to keep in mind that I had absolutely no idea what the great deacon was just speaking about. And Yahweh's my witness. I had no idea. But you're going to see how wonderful this ties in. Yahweh is so amazing, and He's inspiring His people in these last days. Now, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the 16th Book of Yisrayl, the Sea of Glass. Now available at the men's and women's South offices. Get your copy. You're going to, after you hear this, you're going to want to run down there and grab this one. Okay, so let's get started. Now, before I get started, I want to show you a picture on the House of Yahweh website. When you go to the website, you'll see this picture here, and it says, the Savior Yahshua, the laws, statutes, and commandments. And it has this little sprout coming up out of the ground. Okay? I think that's very interesting in what you're going to see today. Now, running the 16th book of Yisrayl through the gematria calculator. You could zoom in just a little bit more. We have the numbers 1938, 1980, and 330. So let's get started. And now you're going to have to get your lungs ready, okay? Because on the count of 3, you're going to have to do what this says, okay? It means, praise you, Yahweh. It says, praise you, Yahweh. And it's from 2 words here, from 1935 and 3050. 1935 means splendor, majesty, and vigor, as in zeal and strength. And then 3050, it says Yah, the proper name of the one true Father. And it's from 3068, and it means the existing one. And you see the Yod, He, Wah, He right here. Yahweh, the name of the Creator, the proper name of the Creator. So, praise you, Yahweh, right there in the gematria of the 16th book of Israel. And remember, Pastor mentioned that number 16 yesterday, right? All right. Number 1938 in the Greek means an eager desire for, one who desires. It means to crave. It means to set the heart upon. And when I read that, and let me read the rest before I say what I wanted to say. It says, to show focused passion as it aptly builds on what a person truly yearns for. To greatly desire, to do or to have something. To long for, to desire very much. And when I saw to set one's heart upon, I thought of Psalm 91 verse 14, if you'd be turning there real quick. Psalm 91. I'll give you a page number here in just a minute. Psalm 91, verse 14, where it says on page 471, Yahweh says, because you have set your love upon me, I will deliver you, cause you to escape. I will set you on high because you know my name. You set your heart upon Yahweh. You set your love upon Yahweh. Also, turn over to 1 Timothy 4:13. Remember, the very first commandment is to love Yahweh with your whole heart, soul, and might. Deuteronomy 6:4, right? Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is one. And you must love him with your whole heart, soul, and might. Where the apostle Shaul says, until I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, to the teachings. Do not neglect the gift that is in you, which was given to you through prophecy with laying on of the hands of the body of elders. Set your love upon these things. Give yourselves completely to them, it says. Completely. Not 99%, but completely to these things. That your progress may be evident to all. Pay attention to your neighbor. Nope. Pay attention to the doctrines and pay attention to yourself and to the doctrines of the house of Yahweh. Continue in them. For in doing this, you will save both yourself and those who hear you. If you do these things. And finally, it means to set the love upon, to long for, rightfully or otherwise. And in this case, we're talking about rightfully desiring something, which we should desire the word of Yahweh. And I looked up that word in Psalm 91:14 here. I looked up the word set your love upon, and it's 28:36, and it means to cling. And that reminded me of Pastor's birth year, 1934. It means to cleave. And to cleave means to cling on to hold on to grasp. Okay, so that's telling us we need to cling on to this witness. We need to join with this witness in this work, in studying and reading the teachings that come forth from our pastor. It means to join. It means to love, to delight in, to have a delight, to desire, to long, to love, to be attached to long for. All these things. Remember, set your love upon me, because you have set your love upon me. And it's from this word 28:20, and this is interesting, it means to reserve and to spare. Turn over to Malachi 3:17. Malachi 3:17. By the way, that number 5 also means mercy. It means mercy. Malachi 3, we're looking at verse 17 on page 726. We'll look at the 16 first. Then those who reverenced Yahweh spoke often one to another, and Yahweh paid attention and heard them. And a book of remembrance was written in his presence of those who gave reverence to Yahweh and who thought upon, considered, and regarded his name. Well, how do you do that? You just sit there all day thinking about Yahweh? No, you study. You consider the things you're reading. You go to the teachings. Pay attention to the teachings, right? Get involved in the work. Regard Yahweh. Show the deepest regard and respect. Remember, reverencing Yahweh. To show that deep love and concern and respect for Yahweh. Who thought upon, considered, and regarded his name. And they will be mine, says Yahweh. In that day, when I make up my jewels, I will spare them, as a man spares his own son who serves him. Notice, conditional. Who serves him. His own son who serves him. But turn over also to Deuteronomy 29 real quick. Deuteronomy 29. Because Yahweh is not going to spare us if we don't do these things. Okay? He's not a respecter of persons. Deuteronomy 29:19 on page 172. It says, I solemnly entreat you to enter the covenant, so it will never come to pass when one hears the words of this curse that he can congratulate and delude himself in his heart and erroneously think I'll have peace and safety even though I persist in going my own way. Yahweh will hold all his sins against him. He has acted presumptuously. He's a drunkard, totally out of control. Yahweh will never be willing to spare him. Okay, Yahweh will never be willing to spare him, it says. And we need to believe these things. Moving on now, the next number in the gematria of the 16th book of Israel is 1980. Now, everybody should remember... by the way, when you think of 1934 in this generation, if you could just remember Matthew 24, 33, and 34, he tells you... that generation, remember, Pastor was conceived in 33 and born in 34. He says that generation will not pass, okay? When you see all these things in verse 33, know that is coming and the end of the age is near at the very door. Truly I say to you, that generation will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. 1980, if everybody remembers, was the dedication of the work of Yahweh in Abelin. And in the Two Witnesses book, page 192, if you remember, we read out of here about dedication meaning renewal. Renewal, okay? And I can't go back over all of those things in the time that I have, but you need to remember these numbers, these definitions. We need to really be studying as much as we can here. But 1980, it means to became greater, becoming increasingly. It means desires. It means flow and flowing, grew steadily, and that's what we've been doing. We've been continuing along since the dedication, growing, learning, becoming green, right? Growth, the growth that's been taking place. And it also means grew continually, growing, pressed heavier. You can think about the great Kohan's sermon yesterday about this pressing of the olive oils, and it means to sprout. To sprout. And Pastor, by the way, wrote about this very thing in the Mark of the Beast, Volume 2, about the establishment of the house of Yahweh in chapter 13. This was written about in 1976. Imagine that. It all goes back to the Mark of the Beast. Nothing is new. The house of Yahweh established was actually written in the Mark of the Beast books. In fact, I have it with me, but I probably don't have time to show it. And it's from this word yalak, and it means to bring, which you remember that's what Abelin meant, to flow. It means to grow, I'm sorry, let me get this in here. It means to grow, to prosper. Remember Isaiah 52:11. The word that Yahweh sends out, it will prosper in whatever he sends it out to do, okay? And it's helped us tremendously through our overseer in teaching us these laws, pouring out this golden oil on us in these last days. And by the way, that word number 1980 is used 3 times in Isaiah 2:3. It's where it says, and shall go many people and say, come. Come is 1980. And also, we will walk is 1980. It's used 3 times just in that one verse alone, okay? In Isaiah 2:3 about the establishment of the house of Yahweh in these last days in the top nation of all nations. Okay, let me see. They shall spring up. Oh, okay. And also, if you remember Isaiah 44:4, where it talks about they will spring up, okay? Remember, it meant to sprout, to spring up, to grow. It means branch, grow, growing, spring forth, sprout, sprouted, sprouts. And get this, to spring or shine forth, shining, shining. And let me see if I have time to do that. Let's see, shining. Well, let's see. Yeah, house of Yahweh established. Let me show you something here. If I didn't throw that over here. Here it is. On page 47 of the house of Yahweh established, Pastor shows right here, they shall spring up, sprout, spring up, shine forth. And Pastor says, shine forth. Remember, this is speaking of the seed of the 2 witnesses who have been given Spirit Holy of Yahweh. They shine forth. Okay, they shine forth. Okay, remember that. Also, 1980 in the Greek means to look upon, visit, and select. Remember the song that was sung this morning? To look upon, visit, select. To examine with the eyes. To look upon or help in order to benefit. Remember that word beneficence. Beneficence. I don't know how to say it. But the great son of Israel, Abel, Shalom just got done telling you about. Okay? It means to look upon in order to help or benefit. It also means a light from on high has looked, and others shall look upon us from on high. Does anybody remember what Pastor said? Who's looking right now? Revelation 11:19. The house of Yahweh was made open for all to see in heaven. Y'all remember that? It's in this very verse right here. It also means to furnish with things necessary, to furnish oneself or for oneself, having gathered and made ready the things necessary for the journey. Well, remember, the word of Yahweh, remember in Tamai, it talks about, you know, it can fully furnish you for righteous works if you read it and you study it and you apply it. Now, the last number is 330 in the 16th book of Israel, Gematria. And it means to thrive, to flourish again, to thrive. It means to grow green again, to flourish again, to shoot up, to sprout. It means the condition and affairs are becoming more prosperous. Right? Right here in the house of Yahweh. Would you agree, house of Yahweh? It means to flourish and to revive. It's from 303, and it means to anew, to renew. It also means between, like in the midst, as you'll see right here in Revelation 7:17. Turn over there real quick. Revelation 7:17. On page 976 says, for the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will feed them and will lead them to living fountains of waters, and Yahweh will wipe away all tears from their eyes. Remember the great Kahan Yehuda sermon. Let the dead bury the dead. They're going to be resurrected soon. Be joyous, rejoice. Okay, now turn over to Zechariah 6:11. Remember, in the midst. Zechariah 6:11. You should remember who the council of peace is between, right? On page 719, it says, speak to him and say, this is what Yahweh of hosts says, behold the man whose name is the branch. Speaking to Yahshua, to behold Pastor Israel Hawkins. He will branch out from his place, will build the house of Yahweh. Yes, he will build the house of Yahweh. He will bear glory and sit and rule on his throne. He will be a priest upon his throne, and the council of peace will be between Yahshua Messiah and Israel Hawkins. Now, remember, we're talking about 303. I'm going to read a quote from the 7th book of Israel, chapter 31, from 1508, verse 229, or 228. Daniel 12:6. It says, and one said to the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, how long? Well, and Deacon David just asked that question, right? How long? That's the question asked by all of you. How long? Pastor says, and then notice verse 7. Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, and when he held up his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and vowed by him who lives forever, standing fast now, that it will be for a time, times and a half, when Yahweh will have accomplished pouring out his power through his holy people, giving them white robes, you see. This is the same thing Daniel's saying. Same thing Revelation says, giving them white robes. And remember, the white robes of Revelation 19:18. Righteousness of the saints is the fine linen. Yahweh is our righteousness. 330 also means fine linen. Fine linen. It means fine linen. And I don't have it with me. Okay, here we go. The man clothed in linen, 2949. It means tenderly cared for. Cared for. Nursing. 2946 is what it's from, and it means bore. To be full, to overflowing, to abound. It means to dandle, as in pamper. Remember Genesis or Revelation 12:14? We're being pampered and nourished and brought up in the wilderness. We just heard about this pampering going on right now. But notice what else. 3072 is another number in, this is the man clothed in linen, gematria, who on that future day is teaching. 3072. Well, we just heard about 3072. Remember, that was Yahweh Siddiqenu. Remember that? Yahweh Siddiqenu. And guess who Yahweh Siddiqenu is to us? Let me show you this picture before I leave. $1074 is what you should be zeroing in on right now. Y'all remember that number? Here he is. Right here. Yahweh, the great witness, the man clothed in linen, pouring out the golden oil on all of us, clothing us with white robes even as we speak. That's who this is talking about. The great witness, Israel Hawkins. And I'm really sorry I lost that piece of paper. But look up 330. It means fine linen. That's the only definition of it. Fine linen. Fine linen. And the man clothed in linen, I'm going to get off here so we can get the man clothed in linen up here very soon. But get that 16th book of Israel. Keep studying to show yourself approved unto Yahweh. You will not be ashamed if you do so. May Yahweh bless. If you'd all please stand, may Yahweh bless each and every one of you. And oh, by the way, there it is. Fine linen. But 330. Linen. Fine linen. Woo! Thank you, Yahweh. And at this time, if you'd all please stand as you are, I'd like to turn it over to the great Kohan, or the great Deacon David Knighton Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom again. Please be seated. Well, this is real exciting. I'm going to tell you what, it only takes a minute or two, in fact, less than a minute, for us to get an answer back when we're crying out to Pastor, asking him, when is this going to take place? How much longer, Pastor? When is our redemption? You remember the number 5. Let me show it to you because I know some could not see it on the phone. We're going to zoom in a little bit. If you look right there, you can see the number 5. Should be able to see it quite clearly. And of course it shows up much better on the screen of the phone, but there it is right there. Now, what we didn't see there until I guess it was asked is we got an answer back. All right, are my children ready? Pastor's like, are my children ready, Yahweh? Well, look at this answer right here. I don't know if you can see it yet, but you see that Y? Now, the 5 is right in here, but here's a Y, the E, and the S, okay? Yes, they're ready. This was seconds after we did this, okay? And there it is right there again, the yes. And so you can see it one more time. There it is. And so, but you got to remember, Yahweh's given us all that we need to be ready, and now we have to choose righteousness or evil. We don't want to choose that spirit of unholiness. We want to choose the spirit of holiness. And in the prophetic word recently, Pastor said, he says that Yahweh will not force you to choose righteousness. He allows each person to choose either his way or Satan's way. But he shows what his way will bring to those who choose it, and he shows the destruction Satan's evil, sinful way brings. And for 6,000 years, mankind has suffered what Yahweh warned that Satan's way would bring. So with that, you ought to be very joyous with that and be ready for when Pastor comes out. But if you'll all please stand right now, it's my privilege and honor to present to you the great Kohan, Ilya Heiler Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. As we go through the news today, it's very important with everything that you've seen, and of course, our great teacher has made this house ready. He is preparing us to be acceptable sacrifices or offerings unto our great Father and through our high priest, and that's what our great teacher is doing. Watch the news today, and I want you to consider how many things that Pastor has told us throughout the years, and you may think, but it's clean. Why? Why can't we do it? Well, there's very important reasons on why we can't do it. One is complete obedience to the one sent. But tuna fish is coming out. It was sold in the state of Texas through restaurants, through a food distribution center. It would go into restaurants, so it's tuna steaks. And they'll show what the steaks look like, and if you didn't think that it was important to follow Pastor's teaching by don't go in restaurants, don't be eating this food, stay out of it. If you didn't do that, it's possible you could have hepatitis A because it tested positive for hepatitis A. Now they're trying to pull it all back, but they say in the news if you've been sick since you've eaten it, you need to get medical attention. So after you've eaten it, it's too late to know that you've actually been in contact with it. And then going into public school systems, of course, teachers are supposed to be, the Peaceful Solution teaches that our teachers are the leaders of tomorrow and training our children to be the leaders of tomorrow, but teachers are very valuable. Well, take a look and see what occurs in the school systems, the public school systems, when two teachers disagree. The students could even break up the fight. And it's embarrassing that it takes place like that, but that's what's going on. And then Afghanistan. Think about Afghanistan and what we've seen in Afghanistan. If you remember back to 2001, supposedly some people from Saudi Arabia knocked down some buildings, so we went and attacked Afghanistan. And in all of that common sense right there, that's supposed to be something positive, but it's not. But if you remember back to the origination of the Taliban was created, it was funded by the United States to fight Russia when Russia was fighting in Afghanistan. Well, this is a continual war that's taking place, and of course you hear in the news, we're going to pull troops out, we're going to put troops in, we're going to pull troops out. Well, no decisions that are being made is improving it, and they're going to see a little bit about how the 16 years of American presence in Afghanistan is still very deadly. In fact, they're worse off now than what they were to begin with because war doesn't bring peace. And of course, they're saying that the adversaries, as they're calling them, ISIS, Taliban, whatever you want to refer to them as, remember who created them, that they said if you want a war, we'll give you a war. And it's going to be an all-out war. So watch very carefully and how these things are proceedingly getting worse. And then, of course, on a show on RT, it's called Crosstalk. They're talking about, and this is very important, remember what Malachi Martin said, remember what Pastor's been putting in our minds all of these years because it's extremely important, even though it sounds like a small thing, how you have countries vying for positions. Well, the United States is starting to look weak to the nations because they're pulling out of the climate agreement. That's what the effort they're doing. They're cutting off funding for it. And there's a lot of division. You see a lot of White House lawsuits going on right now. A lot of cabinet members being investigated. So that makes a country or a system looks weak. Well, all of these other countries are starting to try to vie for position. They see the top position is getting weak. They want that position. And it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And I do mean literally dog-eat-dog because they're outside of the gates and there's no love in them. But they're vying for positions. But also pay close attention. There's a man who he's talking about Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, his political positions. And he says that, well, there's a man leading his positions. They're not hiding it. He's in the White House. He's showing him what to do. And that man's name is Henry Kissinger. Pay close attention to what's being brought. Pastor brought these things many, many, many years in advance. We have no way to fall unless we choose to fall in these things. And then the climate agreement itself, there's many leaders speaking against this. Of course, they're talking down to the United States about this pulling out. But also watch what's taking place in the United States. You have governors, you have other political leaders. They're trying to form a pact now. They're saying if the United States won't stay in the agreement, we will. California's trying to. You have Washington trying to, Washington State. You have New Mexico. They're trying to pull in Mexico, the country of Mexico, and Canada. They're trying to make a conglomeration to where they can, even though technically they cannot sign the climate agreement because it has to be the country itself that does it, but they're trying to make a stance, a push. And you can guarantee this push is being done for a reason. And then last but not least, Megyn Kelly, she interviews President Vladimir Putin. And she specifically asked him about Assad and these chemical weapons attacks. Remember, we showed this not long ago where Assad said this was fake. This was staged. We didn't do this. And then they asked Putin, well, you know, you and the United States were supposed to go in and take out these weapons that Syria was using. And watch what President Vladimir Putin does. He very quickly says, well, let me correct you. We never said they were using them. We said that we would help get rid of them. And the very last thing he says, remember, it would be made to appear in the midst. I sure hope and pray President Vladimir Putin will watch what comes forth from the house of Yahweh, because he's on the right track, but he needs the words of the one sent to see. He says that they're afraid the truth would have the light shed on it. Well, it's being to be made appear in the midst, and it's being done that way from the one sent in these last days. And if they would look to the house of Yahweh, they would see the source of all of these troubles. Then you will see the quartet start to turn and follow the teachings of our great teacher and our high priest, Yeshua Messiah. If we could please go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, President Trump makes his decision on the climate agreement, and that has a couple people making decisions on their own. Also, North Korea is another step closer to its goals, and we'll look at an interesting interview with President Vladimir Putin and some of his comments regarding that Syrian gas attack of the sarin gas attack in Syria. Right. Well, these stories and more, but first, have you ever seen a fight at school between teachers? Oh, no. Well, the Stone Mountain Middle School in Atlanta, Georgia can now say they are part of that select few. A teacher and a teacher's assistant attacked each other right in front of a classroom full of students.
Well, some students tried to break up the fight, yelling for the teachers to stop and even approaching the brawling women, but were unsuccessful. School staff members had to come in and break the fight up. Well, both women involved were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct.
Well, parents are calling for the two women to be fired. The school sent a letter home to parents notifying them of the incident and assuring them appropriate measures would be taken to assure the safety of their students. Now, part of that letter read, anyone who creates an unsafe learning environment for our students will receive swift disciplinary actions. In Catan, it wasn't clear what exactly those disciplinary actions were, but they said they will deal with it appropriately.
Interesting. Well, something else becoming more common these days, food recalls. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says frozen tuna sold in Texas, yeah, you heard that right, Texas, California, and Oklahoma grocery stores are being recalled due to the possibility that it is contaminated with hepatitis A virus. Yes, for those who don't know, hepatitis A is a contagious liver disease.
Well, the FDA was made aware of the problem when the Hawaiian Department of Health notified them that frozen tuna cubes from Indonesia had tested positive for hepatitis A. Now, the tuna has been sold at a central market located on North Lamar in Austin, Texas, and it was also sold to the food distributor Cisco Foods, who then sells it to retailers. So no telling just how far and wide that has gone out.
That's right. Symptoms of hepatitis A are stomach pains, jaundice, nausea, loss of appetite, fever, fatigue, and diarrhea. The FDA is urging consumers to seek immediate help from their local health care provider if they think they may have gotten sick from eating tainted fish. Well, of course, by that time, it may be too late.
Absolutely. Well, in President Trump's recent meeting with European leaders overseas, he urged them to start paying more to support the NATO army. A recent RT Crosstalk show discussed the possibility of Europe separating itself from relying on its American partner. Take a look at this interview.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel says we Europeans truly have to take our fate into our own hands, adding we have to fight for our own destiny. Well, indeed, Europe is still relatively rich. Why shouldn't it be more self-reliant? Is this the start of a transatlantic divorce? Europe needs to be more self-reliant, and if NATO is to exist in the way the people in power that want it to exist, they need to pay for it. The people in power that want it to exist, they need to pay for it. That means Germans have to pay more, French have to pay more, Poles, everybody else. Everyone should pay if they feel their security is threatened. So remarkably, we have this moment in history where we have two people diametrically opposed to each other.
Well, I think the audience is looking for clarification and penetrating analysis and understanding of where we're going. And I'm afraid they'll be disappointed by this show, not because of the failures of any of the participants, but because of the complete opaqueness of the meetings that took place this last week. I mean, both the G7 and the NATO meeting. Very little came out of it. In fact, when you mention at the start Angela Merkel's remarks, that is these are virtually the only tea leaves we have to understand that there was a very serious conflict between Trump and the European allies. What the nature of that conflict was came out in unconvincing, unpersuasive terms, as covered in the New York Times. That it had to do with global warming, that had to do with trade rules, and that it had to do in the terms of NATO with their contributions.
Is somebody bluffing in this conversation here? I mean, NATO is the pillar of Western security. We've been told that, particularly last 25 years, where it is an alliance looking for a mission, and that mission, I guess, is supposed to defend itself against quote-unquote Russian aggression. Well, do the Europeans want to pay for this? Because a lot of people are saying security against what? What is the risk? And when you make people pay for it, they're going to ask some more penetrating questions and not listen to just propaganda. Go ahead, Ralph in Stuttgart.
Well, Peter, I think it's quite simple. What is happening right now has been overdue for many, many years, if not the last 20 years, because I say when the Iron Curtain came down, it was the moment that the 20th century and the post-war history actually has finished. It has come to a conclusion. Then we had some time where we didn't know what to do with NATO, whether NATO should still exist or not. And first we were offering even to the Russians that they could participate. Then this offer was being withdrawn, and this is where we have a lot of the controversy now. Now, I think, as you said before, there's a window of opportunity here, or a historic moment, kind of, where all the leaders have to reassemble again and regroup and to say what they want.
When Merkel used the pronoun we, she meant we Europeans. One of the interesting things that the Western media doesn't really talk about very much, that is, you know, if you can continue to try to keep the Russians at bay, you know, keep the Russians out, okay, keep the Americans in and keep the Germans down, this is kind of a defining moment, because is this what Angela Merkel is talking about? Because, you know, if you look at the situation with Russia and Mr. Trump may be signaling that he's lost interest, then you have a German-centric Germany. Is that something NATO allies have actually thought about? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think that's always been the problem. Yes, that whether we talk about NATO or we talk about the EU, one of the reasons why other countries like the Dutch or the Danes or whoever wanted the British in was in order to balance any preponderance of German power, including economic power. For a long time, the Germans under Kohl, and even it seemed at first under Angela Merkel, were basically saying we don't want to be the leader, we don't want to be the driver of Europe, because we are slightly afraid of what that means. Will our national demons come unstuck and come out into the open again? And now, with her own election coming up in September, she is playing the nationalist card. Maybe she will drop this card once re-elected. But, of course, the situation is changing, as your two other contributors have said, and particularly Donald Trump has thrown down the gauntlet on why do the rich Europeans pay so little for the NATO alliance? Why do the rich Europeans pay so little for the NATO alliance? And of course the big question now is, if, even though they do pay relatively little compared with the States, if we take all the European NATO countries together, they have much more conventional military power than Russia. So if Russia might, in a sense, theoretically pose a threat to a weak neighbour, say Ukraine, it can't really pose a threat to the European NATO allies, because taken together they greatly outnumber the Russian armed forces.
Well, if the United States is going to start some kind of amicable divorce here, doesn't that really, is it incumbent upon the Europeans, because we have to keep in mind Brexit, for the Europeans to reassess their relationship with Russia? I mean, if the United States isn't going to be in the picture, if the UK isn't going to be in the picture, maybe this would be a good thing. Maybe this would be a fresh start to talk. Go ahead, Gilbert.
Well, the first thing that we have to understand, and I was getting at in my opening remarks, is we don't really know who is running foreign policy in Washington today. Because of the global assault on the Trump administration and the Russiagate campaigners, the administration has gone into double talk, and from one side of the mouth they're saying everything that the hardliners want to hear about the U.S. policy towards Russia and how we're going to step up sanctions and so forth. And from the other side of the mouth, they're speaking to the audience that would like better relations with Russia, and their feet are pointed in the direction of better relations, as we saw from the outcome of the meeting with Lavrov and Kislyak in Donald's office. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, I would have said that Henry Kissinger is steering Donald. Steering Donald, and that was an answer to the remarks that you hear generally that Donald is rattling around in the White House and doesn't have a clue as to what's going on. No, he definitely had a clue, and he wasn't rattling around by himself. We all saw at the meeting with Lavrov that Henry Kissinger was by his side, and the policies that were being put in effect immediately preceding that had the fingerprints of Henry Kissinger all over them. I mean, precisely the attack on Syria, precisely the threat of attack on North Korea. This was realpolitik in action. It was buying time for Donald for the two-week window that he used to overturn in the House the Obamacare legislation, and that was Kissinger. But what's happened now in this last weekend is certainly not Kissinger. Kissinger has been from the very beginning, going back to the 60s and straight through his time and testifying about Russia policy in the 1990s, when the question of Russia admission to NATO was on the agenda. Kissinger has always been in favor of a strong NATO. So the notion of a NATO that is no longer the driving force of U.S. foreign policy, but a much more modest NATO, if a NATO at all, that is not Henry Kissinger. So who exactly is writing our policy?
Well, quite interesting. Different perspectives. Well, Afghanistan has been plagued by violent attacks from terrorists over the last 2 months, costing dozens of lives. In March, a suicide bomber crashed into a minibus in Kabul, targeting state telecom workers. The blast killed 1 person and caused injuries to 19 more.
Then in April, there was a massive attack by the Taliban on a northern army base, which ended in more than 140 people being killed. Now, the Taliban was seeking revenge for the recent deaths of 2 of its officials in the region. Now, that strike is considered to be the bloodiest so far this year.
But it wasn't the last attack. On May 17th, Islamic State assaulted a television station in Jalalabad. 6 people were killed and more than 24 injured. And then just 4 days ago, a suicide car bomber killed at least 18 people in Khost province.
In an RT interview pertaining to this most recent bombing, former Pentagon official Michael Maloof was asked how a truck filled with explosives could get into one of the Afghan's capital's, quote, safe zone. Well, Mr. Maloof gave several explanations, saying it was not checked, it could have had people there who allowed it to go, and it looked innocent enough. So any one of those possibilities, but nevertheless, it got through.
That's right. Well, it was a suicide bombing, he continued. It could have been detonated anywhere. They could have tried to get into areas that were more heavily guarded and were turned back. So the bombing was meant to do as much devastation and civilian casualties as possible.
Well, former State Department official Matthew Ho told RT that the situation in Afghanistan is not improving, basically because they are only using war as a means of solving the problem. Ho said, "You want a war? You'll get a war." The suffering in Afghanistan has been going on for decades. Now, the war has been escalated a number of times, he said, and the results have been the same, which basically that there have been no positive results, only, like you said, escalation and really more war, no problem solving.
Yeah, and it didn't sound like the statement he made was really a solution to the problem as well. Well, for continued coverage and more details on the Afghan bombing, we now turn it over to our correspondent, Larry McGee. Larry, what are the number of current casualties right now?
The suicide truck attack is reported to have killed 90 people and injured almost 400 others, including 11 citizens from the U.S. The bombers used a water delivery truck, which is said to have been on its way to the area of Kabul. The truck was stopped at a checkpoint, and that is where the blast occurred. Authorities say that if it had been able to slip past the checkpoint, the number of those dead might have been significantly higher, possibly affecting many embassies which are also in the area. Tensions are getting higher as North Korea launched its 3rd ballistic missile test in just 3 weeks. The alarm being sounded is that with each test, the DPRK gets closer to achieving missile technology capable of striking the U.S. Reporters say that concern is heightening among American defense officials who believe that with each effort, North Korea gains deeper technical knowledge. Images are circulating from the latest launch, which is being called a success, supervised by the country's President Kim Jong-un. The missile is said to have traveled several hundred miles into the China Sea and ultimately landed between Japan and North Korea. This makes the 9th test in total since the current president took office, and President Trump has been reportedly tweeting his disapproval, while the U.S. has also been testing new missile technology of its own. The U.S.'s missile intercept capabilities were tested for the first time this week, with the mock warhead being launched from a Pacific island and a ground intercept being shot from California. If the intercept is successful, the system's kill vehicle will stop the mock warhead mid-flight over the Pacific. America is reported to have had some successes with regard to short-range tests, but not with long-range tests so far. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan, you can definitely see with all of North Korea's recent missile tests, you can see why the U.S. wants those anti-missile interceptors ready and functioning properly.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, the U.S. has decided to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, and this has created a stir with the leaders within the U.S. Now, Democratic governors from California, Washington, and New York said that they will not let the U.S. Back away from a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and called the president's move insane, while vowing to uphold the Paris commitment.
The three governors said that they would form a new coalition called the U.S. Climate Alliance. Connecticut and Virginia governors have also expressed interest in joining the pact. And just as a note, Canada, leaders from Canada and Mexico are also a part of that as well. Well, protesters have also been voicing their disapproval for the president's withdrawal from the agreement. In fact, Michael Breen, the president of the Truman National Security Project, said of the president's move, "This is a decision that cedes the leadership of the 21st century to countries like China, to our economic competitors, that will have no benefit to the American working class and American economy."
President Trump withdrew, calling the deal unfair to American workers, saying it stifled production and imposed burdens to the country. President Trump's stance on climate change has been harsh at times, calling it a hoax. Well, the U.S. follows just behind China in greenhouse emissions, emissions scientists believe is the cause of global warming.
Now, international criticism has been voiced as well due to the president's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Stefan Dujarric, the UN spokesman, said that the decision was a major disappointment for global efforts to reduce greenhouse emissions and promote international security. As also a reminder, almost every nation agreed to this deal back in 2015, so about 2 years ago, recognizing, as Dujarric said, the enormous impact climate change is having on the entire world.
Well, the new French President Emmanuel Macron said that he respects Trump's decision, but thinks it's a mistake, both for the U.S. and our planet. While the Japanese Environmental Minister Koichi Yamamoto said the climate change issue is a global problem, and we're calling on the U.S. to cooperate.
Well, Governor Jerry Brown, the governor of the sixth richest economy in the world, California, was heading to Beijing, China, to attend a clean energy summit. Governor Brown said Mr. Trump is wrong on the facts, wrong on the science, wrong on the economy, and eventually the Trump administration will have to come around because they can't deviate from the entire world the way that he's trying to now.
Well, lastly, Russia has been in the U.S.'s crosshairs since before the time of the Cold War. Our times have not changed in the last 50 years, as Russia has been continuously accused of many things from the U.S. and its allies. Now, Megyn Kelly had an opportunity to pose some of the pressing questions to President Putin regarding the Syrian conflict. Mr. Putin's response was direct and stern. Take a look for yourself.
We know that Assad has used chemical weapons before, and Russia entered into an agreement in 2013 to stop that. I mean, Russia acknowledged that in 2013 when it acknowledged to try to stop that by Assad. The only question is whether he launched the chemical weapons attack that happened a couple of months ago. And I just want to ask you, press you a little further on this, because we all saw the video of the suffering, dying children, and that was the reason that President Trump dropped the bomb. Do you deny, because Assad denies that those tapes are real. He's purporting to tell us not to believe our lying eyes. Do you believe those tapes are fake?
First, when President Obama and I agreed to work together to destroy chemical weapons in Syria, we assumed that Syria had it, but we never recognized that Assad had used it. So please be more precise. Secondly, as for those people who were killed or who suffered because of the use of weapons, including chemical weapons, this is false information. As of now, we are absolutely confident that this is just a provocation. President Assad didn't use chemical weapons. All of this was orchestrated in order to stage him, to accuse him. Moreover, our intelligence services have got information that in other districts of Syria, not far from Damascus, there were plans to reproduce this scenario, and we made these plans publicly. Those who had been planning this action thought it better not to engage in these actions.
If I could just follow up on that, though, because the bodies of the victims were autopsied at Turkey's Ankara Forensic Medicine Institution. The autopsies were witnessed by officials from the World Health Organization and from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. and they concluded that the victims were attacked with sarin gas. Are we really to believe that the whole thing was staged, that everybody was in on it? The World Health Organization, the Forensic Medicine Institution, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons?
The answer is very simple, and you know it. The answer is very simple, and you know it. Yes, sarin could have been used by someone, but not by Assad. It could have been used by someone in order to accuse President Assad. We have to understand who is to blame. And otherwise, if there is no true investigation, it's only going to play into the hands of those who orchestrated it. I'd like to ask you a question. Why didn't everyone go right away to inspect the air base to the spot where chemical weapons allegedly had been used? Why didn't they want to go to see the aircraft that had been allegedly used to perform the strike? The answer is very simple, because they were afraid that everything, the truth, would come to light. What you are telling me doesn't convince me. They were afraid that everything, the truth, would come to light. They were afraid the truth would come to light. The truth would come to light. The truth would come to light of anything. It just persuades me that we'd better not engage in tag of war there or speculate. We've got to pull our efforts together to counter real threats. And we know what these real threats are. The U.S. is very far. Yes, there was an explosion there. People suffered, which we offer our condolences. But we also know what terrorists is all about. We have seen its manifestations. And no one should try to use terrorists to address short-term political interests. Even there are attempts at that. Yes, there are attempts at using terrorists against, say, Assad. Why use them? Because no one else would fight. I do not think it's worthwhile using these terrorists today, because tomorrow it's gonna cost you a lot. When Al-Qaeda was created in Afghanistan to fight against the Soviet Union, they didn't know that it would strike the US on 9/11. We've got to think about negative ramifications in the long term.
Well, definitely sound like President Putin is standing his ground on his statements.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's clear to see that as long as mankind tries to take advantage of his neighbor, as long as there's not a set of rules that everyone can agree on that brings no harm to anyone, including the environment, and as long as today's leaders continue to ignore the voice of reason, our world will never have peace. Well, Yisrael Hawkins is that voice of reason crying out in the wilderness, warning mankind of what their choices will bring, and also showing them a way to lasting peace. If you're ready to listen, well, contact the House of Yahweh to find out what you need to do to find true peace. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to www.ypnnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can email them at info@yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, we'd like to remind you of 2 free programs that will help answer all your scriptural questions. Yisrael Says program and the Ask Yisrael program. You can learn about the Yisrael Says program by going to www.yisraelsays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to www.askyisrael.com.
But don't go anywhere. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.
Now, if everybody will please stand at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to the great Kahan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom again. You may be seated very quickly. Okay, it was a little bit rushed there at the end there, and I want to make sure. Pastor, can turn over to Daniel 12:7 while I'm fiddling with this camera. Can you get that? Get on that picture. That needs to back out of there so I can blow it up. Daniel 12:7 on page 684 says, Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, when he held up his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and vowed by him who lives forever that it will be for a times and a half, when Yahweh will have accomplished pouring out his power through his holy people, all these things will be finished. What I was showing you was the gematria of the man clothed in linen who on that future day is teaching. And these numbers come up, 2949. Remember, that meant to pamper, to nurse, to bring up, okay? 3072 is the word Yahweh Siddiqenu, found in Jeremiah 23, that one of the sons of Israel also talked about this morning. And also associated with that is 512, the man clothed in linen who on that future day is teaching. 512, remember, Yahweh's in full control. Pastor's dream on 512, okay? Now, and remember, I didn't show you this, but that word dandle that was used in 2029, it means to pamper. You know, like to move a baby or a child on your knees, to pamper. And Yahweh Siddiqenu, okay, was the gematria of Yahweh Siddiqenu is 1074. And y'all remember I showed you the picture of Pastor's tag. That was the first tag that many sermons were given on. You all remember that? 1074. Now, Yahweh is in full control. Yahweh does have a man clothed in linen who is teaching us on this future day, okay? The last witness, pouring out the golden oil, clothing us in righteousness, as Revelation 19 talks about the white robes being given to all of us through the teachings of the one sent in these last days, our great overseer, Yisrael Hawkins. So remember that number 1074. I can't really get it to come up, but y'all remember that tag number right there. Can you see it? 1074. There are many sermons that were given on that. I can't, for some reason, it's stuck. You know, it's a condensation or something. But at this time, is it clear now? Is it crystal clear? Because we want to get the man clothed in linen up here, okay? All right. May Yahweh bless you. I'd like to turn it over to the great Kohan Ilya Hawkins.
Now, one last thing to keep in mind. You notice that they kept saying that President Donald Trump is following Henry Kissinger, but no one really knows who's controlling these policies. Remember, who controls who rises or falls? Of course, it's the Catholic Church that's being made to appear in the midst by the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrael Abel Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone.
We still got a crowd here on the Sabbath. Hey, let's go. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. What's occurring here, our men, heads are bursting with knowledge here. And they can't get it all in. And I keep pulling them back to say, hey, repeat this. Now, you got to get this to where the people can understand it. The tag number. You got that? And what it matches. Here we go. I don't want to move it. Don't want to lose it. You see that number? That's my tag number. And if you remember all the trouble that, they sent me a wrong tag, and then they said they didn't send it, and so forth. It all came out quite a while ago. Anyway, thank you. It's still not quite all right, but we're going to get it in the coming sermons. I want you to remember, well, I better go this note first. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We started making a peanut butter, and I keep hearing about reading about the health in peanuts. And I guess it's something that hasn't been quite spoiled yet by the people. The nuts that grow on trees and underneath the ground, and for some reason they're being protected. The nuts protect your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, if you eat a few a day. Now, sometimes I know I don't like to eat. I'd rather study than eat, but and I do a lot of fasting for a lot of different people. But when the hunger overwhelms me when I'm studying and it gets my mind off of my studies, then I go and I get me a tablespoon of peanut butter, and that kills the hunger. I go back to work immediately. And but I told our peanut butter maker we need all the nuts, the mixed nuts. We need not just the peanuts, but the mixed nuts to get this benefit. Praise Yahweh. Well, we got it now, and it's available in, I think he said, 12-ounce jars. Get you some of it before you leave. It's very, very healthy. This week, the leading newspaper articles around the world, Yisrael Hawkins says Bible prophecies were written for our day. And of course, if we can get the people to read these or listen to these sermons that was brought during this time, which we're putting advertisements out now to try to do so. Now, that one went off with a bang. It was up earlier to 63,353 newspapers running this. Plus, it's on Facebook. It's on all of those computer words that I don't know. I don't remember all of them, but you open up the computer and you're going to see the house of Yahweh. That's a fact. It's everywhere now. I don't know if peanut butter would help you here or nut butter would help you here, but the cholera that started now in Yemen, now this started once before and people didn't think anything about it, but it's when it gets to being carried by the wind, you're going to see this is one of the plagues now, that one of the 7 last plagues. Haven't got into it yet, but this is one of them that I told the Vatican, if you don't let our people go, you're going to start suffering these plagues. You're the one that's causing it. I'm not causing it. I'm warning you in advance what you're bringing. You keep on with your sins. You keep on holding Yahweh's people. They're shutting down nations to keep them from coming to the house of Yahweh. You're bringing curses from the environment upon yourselves. As sure as the death came on all of those who didn't have the blood on their doorpost in Egypt, it's going to come upon you, these 7 last plagues. You'd be far better off right now to let Yahweh's people go than you would holding them the way you're holding them and trying to pass more sanctions against them to keep them from coming to Yahweh's house. I know what you're doing. If I know what you're doing, the whole world knows what you're doing. You're trying to hold these people. You're trying to make them worship gods. You're trying to make them worship Mary, who's the big goddess that was worshipped in Egypt by all of you Catholic Coptics. These are the gods that Yahweh brought his people out of. Those that didn't believe lost their firstborn. This is not going to be just on the firstborn. These 7 last plagues are going to be upon all nations that yield to letting the Catholic Church do what she's wanting to do. The leader of the kings of the earth. This is shown in the book of Revelation. Millions, billions of people are going to die. This cholera that I'm speaking of is just the start of these 7 last plagues. Nearly 600 cholera deaths in Yemen. An estimated 70,000 cases of cholera have been reported by UNICEF in Yemen, with nearly 600 people dying over the past month as the disease continues to spread at an alarming rate. The already dire situation for children in Yemen. I know you don't care anything about the children. You don't even care anything about the people that's next to you. All you can think about in the Vatican is you. Just sit there by yourself and never consider anyone around you or what they're doing or what they're causing. Well, of course, it started. The number of suspected cases is expected to reach 130,000 within the next 2 weeks. UNICEF said at least 10,000 cholera cases were reported in the past 72 hours alone. I warned you about this years ago and told you needed to let Yahweh's people go then. You haven't made any efforts. All you've done is put your clinches a little deeper into the nations and trying to scare them into global warming, and which you yourself have caused. If you don't know anything about the book, you need to read the book, The Real Cause of Global Warming. It's not burning fossil fuel, as you call it. That's another lie that you've got spread throughout the schools to prevent the people from believing in the Creator Yahweh. That's what it was for. If you had sense that the donkey next to you had, you would know this. The U.S. will not accept China's militarization. Now, this is the confusion and the bitterness. You see it on the news. Everything we saw there on the news is taking place right now in this time period. We're in the time period between the 2 halves of the 7-year time period that was started, the peace plan that was started, and is shut down after 3.5 years. That's what prophecy said it would be. Why won't you believe the rest of the prophecy? We're in this time period. Yahweh is holding back the nuclear wars, but yes, they are going to come because you will not repent. If you would repent like the children of Israel did, put the blood on the doorposts, you could save the firstborn. You could save all these billions of people. They could turn to Yahweh now, and the earth would have peace through the house of Yahweh. You could be a part of the house of Yahweh. Well, the U.S. will not accept China's militarization of a man-made islands in the South China Sea. Defense Secretary James Mattis has warned. His comments came shortly after the UN Security Council expanded targeted sanctions against North Korea. You know, it's like children out there fighting with a bunch of slingshots, bows and arrows, and sparring at each other. This reminds you of little children. not grown-ups that supposedly are intelligent people. NATO kicks off new round of ballistic drills on Russia's doorstep. Look at that headline. It's like they're taunting each other. Well, I brought you, if you remember, what is taking place right now, and this will turn to the division of the land for gain, of course, and that's what Daniel shows is going to take place. But we're in between the two halves. The 3.5 years, the 7-year plan shut down, and then the 3.5 years that is yet to go. We're between those two. And once this starts up, if you look at Matthew 24, 21, and 22, you'll see the Savior spoke of this time, this last 3.5 years, and says it will be cut short. If it didn't, that 1 hour burning would not be cut short, and it would destroy the whole earth. Yahweh has limited it to 1 hour because he's going to save about 2 billion people that are being warned right now and taking this warning seriously. They're taking it seriously. They're turned and started praying using the name Yahweh. We left off, and this, of course, I know that now the Vatican is revealing that they've had this name hidden for years and years. They had the Book of Yahweh banded for over 1,500 years. We brought it before they did. We revealed their secret before they revealed their secret. Praise Yahweh. But now they're revealing it. They have no choice because of the billions of people that are asking questions. Well, this Mideast peace process, Abbas in Egypt to coordinate stance ahead of Trump meeting. Now, this has already taken place. The PA leader and Sisi, the Egyptian leader, Mideast peace process and crisis developing. This was the 7-year peace plan as showed in Daniel 9, verse 27. And I fully explained this in the Mark of the Beast, so you've got it in writing and also the tapes now that you can listen to. You also need to go back and hear these facts. I know there's a lot of other stuff that we added, but if you'd get this on paper, what the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins brought out this morning, if you go through there and get these, the gematria, if you'll just line up that gematria, which we intend to do that. We're going to bring it again and make it a little bit plainer. But if you just get that gematria and look at it, you'll see that Yahweh is backing up everything that was written and published by his house. Yes, it's so plain. And then he puts the cloud in the sky with the writing in it, the number, and then the writing 5, and then the yes behind it, and the meaning of it is so beautiful. And Yahweh is giving that to his house to encourage you to get this studying done. You know, you have plenty of time. You can work 8 hours and still get studying done if you'll set aside the time to do so. Well, the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, was set to meet with the Egyptian President, Sisi, later on Saturday to coordinate positions on the peace process. That's the 7-year peace process that I've told you was going to start again. It's just shut down, and we're in the midst of this time period. Verse 27, Daniel 9:27 shows that it would be shut down in the midst. And we're in between those two halves. In the midst, we are in between the two halves, and we're making them appear. The man of sin, the religion that teaches people to sin. Right now, the Pope is boasting about bringing forth the goddess Mary. It's not Miriam, the mother of Yeshua. If Miriam, the mother of Yeshua, was alive right now, she'd be hollering and screaming at the Pope and calling him, "You hypocrite, you Pharisee, you Coptic Catholic, why don't you repent of this mess you started in Egypt that Yahweh brought you out of?" That's the word she would be saying to you. Well, 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 7 and 8, let's just rehearse that just a second there. 2 Thessalonians 2, 2, verses 7 and 8, "For the mystery of iniquity is already working. It sits on 7 hills of Rome. Come and I'll show you the sentence of this mystery of iniquity." The abominations that brings abominations to the earth. Revelation 17. You really need to read that, everyone in Radio Land, on computer, everywhere. The mystery of iniquity is, 2 Thessalonians 2 says, the mystery of iniquity is already working, but the one restraining him will continue to restrain him. Yes, that's going on, as Revelation 7 shows, Yahweh holding it back until his servants are sealed in their forehead, which we're doing that now with the name Yahweh. Seal with the name. They finally found out his name was Yahweh. Until he is made to appear in the midst, between the two halves of the 7-year peace treaty that they're now working on. Abbas and Sisi working together on it, along with Donald Trump. And that's shown in Daniel 9:27, and you need to compare those two. And verse 8, he says, "Then the lawless will be revealed." If you hold your place right there and look over to Isaiah, hold your place in 2 Thessalonians, look over at Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11, notice he's in verse 8 now. I'll read it to you. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 8, "And then that lawless one will be revealed." In Isaiah 11 and verse 1, "There will come forth a rod out of the stem of Yeshua." That's Yeshua. I've been through that. I've showed you his bloodline. That's in Matthew, the 1st chapter of Yeshua. But he's not the subject here. The subject is you, brethren. Look, the subject is the branch. And a branch will grow out of his roots. The roots that he left with 12 disciples that we have to grow with. These are the roots from which we come forth. The Spirit of Yahweh will rest upon him. The Spirit of wisdom. You've just shown that by the great elder Benjamin Krause Hawkins. And then David showed it. Our Deacon David showed this over the top of the sanctuary, saying, "Yes, yes. How many words does he need for you?" Yes. Number 5. Look at it. Yes. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding the Spirit of counsel. My eyes are blurring from the tears. And might. The Spirit of knowledge and the reverence of Yahweh, which will make him of quick understanding. What for? Why? And his delight will be in the reverence of Yahweh. He will not judge after the sight of his eyes, nor will he reprove after the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the poor. This is the branch that comes forth from Yeshua, the same that brought forth Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who will be in the kingdom with us. They won't be before us. We're going to resurrect them. We're the last ingathering of the first fruits. Yes, the first fruits came earlier. You should have seen it. You ate some of it. If you ate the bread today, you ate some of the first fruits. It's better when you eat the real thing. The real first fruits is sitting here in front of me right now. And it's really great if you can eat every word of it. Now, you can't do this accidentally. And as Dad used to tell me, I could understand, Bill, I could understand you reading the Bible one time. But why do you want to just keep reading it over and over and over? Well, I'm going to explain that to him when I wake him up. Now, verse 4. But with righteousness he will judge the poor. You got to have the poor to judge them. The churches, the religious organizations don't want anything to do with the poor. They'll send them. They got a special place for them, Salvation Army or jail, either one, or maybe both. He will judge the poor, and he will reprove, that is, teach, reprove with equity for the meek, humble of the earth. That's what it means. For the meek he will reprove with equity, equality of the earth. He will smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. That's what we're doing now in telling about these 7 last plagues that the world is suffering. It started. It's not going to get better. In fact, it's going to get really worse rapidly now. The Pope or the Vatican will use this to try to convince the people they need to stop burning fossil fuel, as they call it. But that's not what he's really wanting. He's wanting their commitment of allegiance to bring about a one-world government. Donald Trump, our President Donald Trump, sees this. He says it's nonsense. Well, he'll negotiate or try to negotiate to get a better deal. He's shut off funding, so that will infuriate the Pope. In fact, it's like a slap in the face, as one article said, to the Vatican. But the branch that will build the house of Yahweh, he will smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips will he slay the wicked. That is, the prophet. He'll bring forth the prophecy. That's what Yeshua said in Matthew 24. And at the end of his, when he's finished, the end will be. That's what Revelation says too. Righteousness will be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. Well, back to 2 Thessalonians now, because this is you, brethren, that is revealing this. I didn't do it myself. The whole house of Yahweh is equally involved in this work. If you're involved at all, you're equally involved and will receive the same reward, Yeshua said. The same reward. You'll receive it. That's what he gave you in parable. And he got a lot of grumbling from it. And he said that you're going to see this in the last days too. But he's going to pay you the same wages, every one of you, whether you came yesterday or 10 years ago, the same wages. You can get the same gift if you humble yourself and get to learning these things he's showing. That's the important thing. Well, back to 2 Thessalonians here, in the midst, that's chapter 2, verse 7, the last word in verse 7. He's made to appear in the midst, and then that lawless one will be revealed, or when that lawless one is revealed, whom Yahshua will remove. That's Yahshua's judgment. Get away from me, you who practice iniquity. He said this in Revelations. He said it in Matthew 7. And he says, I'm going to say to you, if you don't keep Yahweh's laws, I'm going to say to you, get away from me, you who practice iniquity. And he's going to get a lot of grumbling. They're going to say, you know, we taught you in our churches. We taught you in our Vatican. Yeah, sure you did, along with Satan, and told him I was a ruthless Savior. You think he don't know what you're saying? Yeah, I know that's what you think. The Vatican thinks it's hid and no one knows what they're doing. Yahshua will remove with his breath of his coming, breath of his mouth, and make powerless with the appearance of his coming, whose coming is according to the energy of Satan, who works with all power and signs and lying wonders, and you're going to see more of that now to try to convince you and hold you, and with all deceivableness of sin. Sin is the breaking of Yahweh's laws, and you really need to get technical on that one. Like I told you yesterday, even dressing provocatively, if you cause one of these little ones to sin, it would have been better off for you if you had a millstone hung around your neck and you threw it in the ocean than to have caused one of these little ones. That means you got to stand up, and you got to take your stand in your house, and you got to say, no, you're not going to do this in this house. And you got to say, come and study with me, and I'll show you. Well, this is 2 Thessalonians now. If you'll turn over to, we turn to Isaiah 11. Go now to Revelations 11. Revelations 11. Now this is one of the branches. This is made clear here if you just pay attention. You've got to, with the scriptures, you can't just read it like a book. You've got to study it. I used to make notes, and then I wanted to write a commentary. I wanted to write Strong's Concordance. I tell you, that is a great book. It's really admirable what Yahweh did in guiding that to take place for these last days. Revelations 11 now. Here is the revealing that Yahweh shows here will take place as is shown in 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 7 and 8, and then Isaiah 11:4 that we just read, and then here in Revelations 11, and there was given unto me a reed like a measuring rod. Look on down, but the court leave out, verse 2, verse 3, and I will give to my two witnesses. That's what he said in Isaiah 44 also, if you remember. Isaiah 44, he said, who will do this for me? Let them do it. Let them foretell this. My two witnesses at that time, well, chapter 10 and verse 7, but in the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, the seventh lamp of the seven lamp lampstand, the western light that never goes out, the burning bush that never stops burning, never stops talking, pouring out the oil. And I will give to my two witnesses to perform their prophetic offices. I will give to them. This is Yahweh. And they will do this as prophesied by the prophets of old. They will foretell events about the 3.5 years. This is the last part of the 7-year peace plan shown in Daniel, the 9th chapter. The last part, shut down in the midst, we got 3.5 years to go, and it's going to be cut short. It'll be cut short, otherwise all flesh would die. That's how bad it's going to get. It's starting with a little bit of cholera that nobody even thinks anything about. They think, oh, the doctors have had that under control tomorrow, you know, and that's what they thought about the bubonic plague too. 3.5 years, those cast about with darkness. In Revelations 12, it shows you that in more detail and shows that person is trained for that 3.5 years of work. The last 3.5 years to bring forth this, so all of us then could receive this great gift together. The great gift of raising the dead. That's part of it. That's a big part of it, because the microorganisms are going to be working with us at that time. They will know they can trust us. How do they know this? Because you believe without seeing, you're practicing it, humbly practicing it, obeying every word. You won't get there if you don't. These are the 2 olive trees. That's referring you to other scriptures. These are the 2 olive trees. You can't get it by just reading it line for line like you would another book. These are the 2 olive trees. What 2 olive trees? What are you talking about? Well, Zechariah, remember, these are the 2 olive trees. Zechariah 5 and 6 shows you that establishes the house. These are the 2 olive trees, the 2 lamps on the 7-lamp lampstand. That's what Satan took to Rome from the house of Yahweh in Israel. And the people were there finding it out because we've been revealing their secrets. They took the Book of Yahweh along with them. So they could stop you from knowing what's in the actual Book of Yahweh. And then when they were forced to let it out because of the Black Plague, wiping out the cardinals in the Roman Catholic Church, weakened it was a deadly wound. That deadly wound is healing right now, as Revelation shows, but it was a deadly wound that actually weakened the Catholic Church, that actually allowed the King James Bible to be printed. But then even then, they still hid the name, or almost hid it. We got to noticing, Yahweh showing us in Scripture, we got to noticing, hey, this Joshua, now this is the Savior this is speaking of here. Well, you know what I'm talking about, Hebrews 4. And that notice there still remains a Sabbath. The Sabbath for the people of Yahweh. It said God, but we noticed in Genesis, hey, he's different. This person, this being is different from the God. And then he says, don't worship gods. All of those things we got to revealing. And now in these last days, when our workers have been raised up, like the great David Werner, who showed you this stuff yesterday, when they've raised up, that is, trained in the work, and can prophesy and bring this stuff to light, even through the original Hebrew now. That's all been given. That's part of the giving. I will give to my 2 witnesses. You see that? And if any among them determines in his mind to commit sin, the every word of Yahweh, that should be going on in every family. It should be going on at the breakfast, dinner, and supper table if you have those meals. It should be going on instead of that damnable TV set or that computer where they're pulling up all kinds of sin. It should be scrutinized by the parents who are responsible for children Teach your children, train up the children in the way they should go. And when they're old, they won't depart. They will not depart from it. Sword of fire, that like a two-edged sword of fire proceeds out of the mouth of the spokesman. Did you notice this? Notice this carefully. You wouldn't notice it if somebody didn't point it out to you. He's speaking of a person, a single person here. There's two witnesses. You see that? You see the two witnesses? Look at it. Then I will give to my two witnesses. See? But here he's talking about one. Why? You see it? These are the tiny technical things that are put in these verses for you that's hidden from the world. None of the wicked will understand. And you can see why. They read it like a book. Half-heartedly read it like a book. It should be studied. Search out the Book of Yahweh and read. Not one of these are going to fail. Well, notice the spokesman. The spokesman of them. Speaking of one person. And he devours their enemies. And if any among them should continue to commit sin, in this manner it is binding for him to be destroyed. Now, one thing you can rest assured of, Yahweh tells you in no uncertain terms, I will tell you if you're sinning. I won't hide it. So you will know and you'll be able to turn from your sins if you'll just listen to what I'm saying. Now notice verse 6. These hold Yahweh's authority. Now, just before that, it's one person. One person speaking. Do you see that? I just pointed it out to you. The spokesman of them. The spokesman of them. But here it goes back speaking of in the plural. You see that? These. These hold authority, but only one is the spokesman. They hold authority, but only one is the spokesman. Well, that's your two witnesses here. Now, and we're in Revelations 11, 1 through 5. Look at Revelations 11:18. And the nations in this time period of the two witnesses is cast about with darkness, which means deception, but it also means real darkness that is brought about by the explosion of nuclear bombs. Yes, this is the days for it. This 3.5 years, they're trying desperately to put back in operation. The nations were angry at that time that he gives this to his two witnesses. The nations are angry, and your judgment, they put wrath there, the King James Version, and then Satan says, hey, Francis, look at this. Look at this. This is in the King James Version. This is a wrathful God here. And and Francis, he didn't have sense enough to not fall for it. He fell for that joke, and he went out and spoke it on television, and I got a newspaper article on it and corrected him, hoping he'll repent. But Yahweh says he won't. But it's not wrath, it's judgment. The judgment of Yahweh is that these nations will be angry at this time. He tells it even better in Matthew 24, that they're going to have the worst tribulation, worst of everything, worst diseases, everything. So his judgment is come to pass. And the time of the dead, get this. Look at this. Got any dead kin, folks? You'll have the power to resurrect them if you'll turn to Yahweh. Sincerely turn to Yahweh. Humbly turn to Yahweh. Time of the dead that they should be raised, that's in this same time period. This 3.5 years. This last 3.5 years that they should be sentenced. That's the great white throne judgment. spoken of in Revelations 20, starting in verse 11, and that you should give reward. Here's the reward now, to raise the dead. Revelations, these Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would not come alive unless you make it. That's what your scripture says. You are going to make it, Yahweh says. We will resurrect Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all who humble themselves will have a sentencing, a time of judgment like you're having right now. You'll be teaching it, in fact. You'll be teaching these people what you're learning right now. Reward to your servants, the prophets, and to all the saints, to those who reverence your name. How do you reverence the name? I brought about 20 sermons on that. To reverence Yahweh, to go on to perfection, to yield to His laws, to practice His laws, small and great, and should destroy those who destroy the earth. They destroy themselves. Then the house, at that same time now, in this same time period here, the house of Yahweh is opened in heaven, made open in heaven, made open in heaven, where they can see you. It's being shown, your activities and all are being shown. It's open for the heavens. I call heaven and earth to witness this against you. We are the finishing product that Yahweh says, yes, they're ready to see. Oh, what a beautiful sight this morning. The number 5. And behind it the word yes. And the ark of Yahweh was seen in the house, and there was lightnings and voices and thunders and earthquakes, this mighty earthquake. It's shown in verse 13, but it's shown in several places throughout the Holy Scripture. Verse 11 shows the authority now. Verse 11, and after this 3.5 years, then this Spirit, now this was a correction that David Kohan Yehuda Hawkins brought out, Revelations 11:11, showing that this is the authority that is given unto His house right now. This is going to be given in the same time period of 3.5 years cast about with darkness. It's very soon upon us, brethren. We have very little time left. If you listen to this closely, Palestinian Authority, President Abbas was set to meet with Egyptian President Sisi later on Saturday to coordinate positions on the peace process, Before the peace process, ahead of his first meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington this week. This is the 3.5 years, the Revelations 11:1 through 5 shows the spokesman bringing out. Daniel 12, we better turn to that. We better turn to that because there's a lot of it that you'll miss if I don't. Daniel 12, and look at verse 1. Speaking of the same time period cast about with darkness, the time period cast about with darkness, the 3.5 years. Daniel 12, verse 1, and at that time, get it now, at that set time, he calls it a set time, a designated time. If this is translated wrong, and the great Kohan David Yehuda has a perfect translation of this that the authorities agree on. There will be a time of trouble, such as never was. Same thing that Matthew 24 shows. The same time, and at that time, your people will be delivered. Delivered. They're going to be resurrected. Everyone who will be found written in the book of life. Remember, the resurrection, the first resurrection, includes them. The rest of them who were not found written in the book of life will not be resurrected until the 1,000 years is finished. Now, in verse 2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. That's your resurrection. Don't miss it. If you'd put a X or something beside it so you can see these tiny things that he's showing you in this chapter here. Some to everlasting life, and some to shame. All I can tell you is that they didn't humble themselves. The microorganisms wouldn't trust them. Neither would all the heavenly beings trust them that we're going to be sent out to correct. The universe is a big place, and that's what we're going to inherit, and we're going to actually bring it to perfection and peace. Verse 3, and those who are wise will shine as the brightness of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness. If you mark that word righteousness so you can see it and remember the first Yochanan 3 shows you what righteousness is, shows you whether you belong to Satan or whether you belong to Yahweh. Nothing is going to change that. It's not going to be changed ever. And Yeshua says if you belong to Satan, he's going to say to you, I don't know whose house you're from, but it's certainly not mine. Get away from me, you who practice wickedness. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the time of the end. Time of the end. So it won't be understood. Well, of course, if you remember the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they destroyed the house of Yahweh, and then they took the Book of Yahweh and all the wealth of Jerusalem, murdered millions of people, took all their wealth, and shipped it to the 7 hills of Rome, where it remained, and we're the ones who exposed their little secret, and now they're trying to make alibis for it. You think they're blaming their ancestors, see? But they're doing nothing to straighten it out or try to correct the problem. They're doing nothing to put the Book of Yahweh out with the names in it in other languages. The house of Yahweh is the only one that's done that. But close the book, seal the book. Search out the Book of Yahweh, close the book now. That time was 70 AY. Close the book until the time of the end. The time of the end, when I will give to my 2 witnesses. The time of the end. And I will give to my 2 witnesses. Measure the temple in that time period. Measure it. Work on this temple. That's going along with this peace plan. If you notice, they'll have an article on the peace plan, and then they'll have an article on on the rebuilding of the temple. Time of the end, many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. Now, I've brought this out so many times you should have it memorized, but you're hearing it for the first time. Knowledge increased in 1934. That's when history shows it started, the computer, 1934. The nuclear bomb started the same year with the use of the computer. I was born in 1934 to explain the computer and what it was going to bring and to learn the scriptures. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood 2 others. One of them is a spokesman. Now remember that in Revelations. There's one spokesman to the public, but there was 2 witnesses. 2 others, one on this side of the bank of the river, and I've explained that, and the other on the other side of the river. Get our back tapes or the book. And one said to the man clothed in linen, Now that was brought out today with the, I don't know if you got it, but you really need to understand this gematria of these numbers. The 16th edition of the Book of Yahweh, brethren, of the Book of Yisrayl, the 16th edition of the Book of Yisrayl, you really need to understand that, the gematria of these words and numbers here. They're beautiful. That backs up this 100%. Clothed in linen. He has a license plate with the number on it. You showed that last. You should have that now, everyone, and please understand it. Study it until you do. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, how long will it be until the end? Until the end. Well, you see now the spokesman again here. There's 2 witnesses, 2 others teaching on that day, but only one of them clothed in linen and telling about this end time. Talk about getting technical with the prophecies. Brethren, you can't beat this. You've seen it lived out. You've seen this scenario that Yahweh gives here in the Holy Scriptures. You've seen it lived out here as we're practicing the work of Yahweh and producing what we've been prophesied to do. Not that we were saying, well, he tells us to do this and this. Yahweh opened the doors, and then he showed us later we were fulfilling prophecy. Then I heard the man clothed in linen. Notice the man. I heard him. Didn't hear the other one. And look down to about the 6th line. It will be for a time and half a time. 3.5 years. The end, when is the end going to be? We're fixing to go into it very shortly now. 3.5 years will be accomplished of pouring out his power through his holy people. All these things will be finished. When the 7th Malach, remember, Revelations 10, verse 7, the 7th Malach speaks. His plan will be finished. These great secrets of Yahweh will be finished. Well, I heard, but I didn't understand. No, it was sealed to Daniel too. But he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are sealed up until the time of the end, which is the 3.5 years that we're going into very shortly. Many will be purified and made white. That's you, brethren. Many will be purified and made white. And people that are hearing our voices now on television, internet, all of you have part in that work. You know, you may not be punching the buttons on the computer, but you're backing this work that Yahweh has started, and you're a part of it. Everybody is a part of it that enters into the work of Yahweh in these last days. And Yeshua, he gave you a prophecy. And he says, he saw these people standing around. And he said, why are y'all standing around? Why not goeth out into the field and worketh? Talking about doing the work of Yahweh. And then he sent 70 out. When I said that the other day, I brought some surprises, but yes, as others went out, he sent others besides the 12, but he sent 70 out, not to give them salvation, but to alert them that it would be possible for them to enter this work. And those people turned a lot of people to righteousness. From those people, now listen to me, from those people, they started a hatred. They started a work of love, which led to the Vatican wanting to kill all of them. There was a bunch of them. Hitler killed about 6 million of them, but they didn't get the one. They didn't get the parents of the one sent, of the 2 witnesses. And that's what Satan was wanting to do. she still hopes. She still hopes she can destroy the earth and destroy mankind totally. The Vatican doesn't have that ability. They don't have that much sense to know that these beings they're worshiping has an extreme hatred for mankind. They're not allowed to interfere with Yahweh's plan, but they're allowed to deceive and try to get mankind to destroy the whole earth and the heavens that involve the earth. Yahweh restrains them. If he didn't, they'd already killed everybody. They'd have destroyed the earth already. If he didn't cut these days short, which we're fixing to enter with this 3.5 years, if he didn't cut them short, that's what Yeshua said. No flesh would be saved alive. But for the elect, that's you who's doing the work, for the elect's sake, and those that you're reaching, those that we're reaching out there, the ones that the Vatican is trying to forbid them to come to the house of Yahweh at this time, there's a lot of people that's wanting to come. They're being held back, because I knew they would. They're wanting to close more nations to keep anyone from coming from that nation here. and Yahweh is allowing them full reign. That won't stop the work of Yahweh. We're reaching them. We've already reached them. We've sealed them with the name. And they're working on it now. They're using that name in prayer. They're also studying the laws of Yahweh. And they're sending messages back to us saying, I can see that I've been deceived all of my life. And now, just looking in the scriptures, it's a totally new light, they said. Everything is righteousness. Well, these people now, there's about 2 billion that we're reaching or will reach, and Yahweh says, yes, this is it. Number 5, rehearse that. Keep rehearsing it. I had to drive the man back up here to get that to you, so you better not forget it. No, you got to get the rest of this. But you got it, and it's that important that you spend some time on this. Spend some time on this gematria, this number. Make sure you understand everything that was brought today, brethren. Humbly and courageously and determinedly study this and make sure you understand it perfectly. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!